Hi, everyone. It's Henry DeVries, and welcome to the Marketing with a Book podcast. So glad to have everybody here today. A very important topic, co-authoring a book. What does it mean to co-author? And what are the nuances of that? So we're going to have fun today. We get to do a deep dive into this subject. We would like to have our author roll call. So I'll introduce you and give us your name and the title of a book and just a little window peek into your world. It's to get to know each other better because this is the Indie Books family and the family promotes each other. We amplify each other's work. So first we have to know about each other. So here's the opportunity. So I'd like David and then Chris and then Craig. David, Chris, and Craig.
Thanks, Henry. Hi, I'm David Goldman from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I wrote a book called The Road to Happiness: How to Get What You Really Want.
Thank you, David.
My name's Chris Hodges. I am authoring and hopefully soon to be releasing this summer, Your Noble Robot: How Automation Can Help People Profit and Retain Top Talent. I live in Denver, Colorado.
But falling water from Pennsylvania seems to be behind you today.
It's my vacation house, and I wish everyone would just believe that.
Nice, nice. Okay, Craig, and then let's go with Joe.
Thank you, Henry. Calling from beautiful Chicago. I'm the author of the book, Smooth Selling Forever. I put small and mid-sized business owners on the right course to generating significant, predictable, and sustainable sales growth.
There we go. Well, you should meet Joe Palo. Joe, take it away.
Nice segue there. Joe Palo, I'm in Shoreview, Minnesota. My book is being edited right now, so I can't really hold up anything, but the title of it is How to Sell Nothing Better Than Everyone Else, which is what I'm holding up. So it's authentic. It's a logical way to make the emotional or relationship sale.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. How about Mark and then Dr. Ashby?
Thank you, Henry. My third book is titled Defining You: How Smart Professionals Craft the Answers to Who Are You, What Do You Do, and How Can You Help Me?
And I'm Dr. Teresa Ashby, and my book is Better Implementation Now: Why Even Great Strategies Fail.
Thanks. Teresa, always good to see you. Heard you gave a good program when I was away.
Thank you.
And how about Kim? Let's see, Devin is off mic today. So how about Kim Nagel, please?
And I apologize, I just finished with a client, so I didn't get the instructions. Were there additional instructions beyond the book?
I just saw a John Wayne movie and he said, never apologize, it's a sign of weakness. So,
no, that's from NCIS. That's rule number one.
No, Kim, it was just introduce yourself in the book and a little, you've got 30 seconds to give us
okay. 30 seconds. I'm Kim Nagel. I'm a speaker, author, and a business coach. I've been doing this work for 30 years, and I wrote the book, The Damn Plan: How to Find Freedom, Love, and Money in Your Business. And it is the ultimate guide for building a business that helps you design a business that fits within the context of your life, not trying to squeeze a life out of what's left over from your business.
Very nice, very nice. We do a lot of improv here. Mark, I'm thinking of throwing it to you for the start of this. And the person I wanted you to talk about was Ken Blanchard, because you and I visited with Ken Blanchard on this topic about co-authoring a book. And I wanted to have you just start it with that and share some thoughts. And I certainly have some to jump in with.
Well, thank you, Henry. And I think I was the confirmed solo author for life and would never entertain the idea of co-authoring. And the horror story that I have is back in 96, 97. I don't even know if Henry knows this story, but I did have a contract with a co-author, and we had a $20,000 advance with Wiley at the time, and it turned into a disaster. And I thought, never again would I ever co-author a book, until I heard Ken Blanchard at our first Indie Books Friends and Family Forum talk about the power of co-authoring. And a lot of people don't know that he has co-authored 60 books, 62 maybe it is now, and he's never released his own book. And when he was asked how come he's such an evangelist for co-authoring, he said, I always learn so much more when I work with someone else. And that was like a whack alongside my head, because I had made the mistake of publishing Growing Your Business in 2000. I waited 10 years to publish my second book, Never Be the Same. Do not do that. And then I made the mistake again. I waited 7 years until we came out and I co-authored with Henry and Kathy McAfee, Defining You. And then 1 year later, Henry and I co-authored Build Your Consulting Practice. And then 2 years after that, Henry and I and Penny Reed co-authored a special book in the dental world. And so count me a converted fan to the power of co-authoring. I think the opportunities are endless. I wish that as our family of authors got to know each other better, that it might spark some people to maybe come together and collaborate on a cooperative type topic. Henry and I and Scott Love right now are working on Rainmaker Confidential, to be followed by Devin and I co-authoring a book on marketing with a speech. So I will publish my own book again, but for now, count me a fan on the subject of co-authoring.
There's so many advantages to co-authoring. To your point, what Ken shared is you learn so much from the other person. The other one is that it's somebody to share the workload. You can share the expenses. You still get to keep your back end, the consulting that happens as a result of the book, the paid speeches that happen as a result of the book. So you still get your upside. You're not giving up half of that. So there are some nuances though. So your first experience didn't go well. Others I know experiences haven't gone well. I'm going to tell a bit of a longish story here. It's instructive about Tom Searcy. So Tom Searcy, if you know, was best-selling author of a book called Whale Hunting. And he ran into a snafu with his co-author, who was a 50-50 co-author, and they had a falling out. And the co-author was able to block him from using whale hunting as a concept in any of his marketing for any of his programs. All he could say is he was the co-author of the book Whale Hunting. That's when I met Tom. He needed a ghostwriter to help him create some books, and we were working on some books together when he wrote a column for Inc. called How to Close a Deal Like Warren Buffett, 500 words. And the senior editor from McGraw-Hill for marketing and sales books saw it, loved it, and asked Tom several times, would he do a book proposal for McGraw-Hill on that book? And Tom was busy running $1 million business. He didn't have time. So finally, after 3 times, he turned to me and said, Henry, how much would you charge me to write a book proposal for McGraw-Hill for this book? And how much would you charge me to write the book? And my response was half. I want half. It's the Eddie Murphy divorce in California routine. Half. I want half. So Tom said, I get it. And then sent an email that day to McGraw-Hill, to Danya, the editor, and said, Henry DeVries is aboard on the project. He'll have the book proposal to you by next Friday. Yeah, I'm not good at the agreement phase, as Mark says. And sometimes I'm good at the sales phase, but getting the terms down wasn't good. So I did it though. In a week, I put together this proposal. Tom helped. McGraw-Hill said it was the best book proposal they had seen in 10 years, not the content for the book, the marketing plan. A book proposal is about the marketing plan. It's about convincing a big publisher to publish your book, to put up front a lot of expenses because they're convinced they're going to make a lot of money down the road. And for that, they'll pay you 15% of your money. So I have mixed feelings about big publishers and traditional publishers. But in the negotiations, Tom said, I'll split the money with you in half. I get it. I need to control 51% of the book. It's a 59-49 split. And I said, I get it. I understand because of what had happened with his co-author. He never wanted to put himself in a position where somebody could block him. So on some of these books Mark and I have talked about, we've written the agreement where one of the books Mark controls 51%, another book I control 51%. We always want somebody in charge. That's a learning I took. Things can go well, but one day things may end. Everything ends in life. Well, the relationship with the co-author might end. And if you're the one who's the lead person on the intellectual property, you need to be in control. Now, I didn't know that the first time I co-authored a book 30 years ago. It didn't matter. I never fell out with my co-author. Her name was Diane Gage Lofgren. We lost Diane this year. She was 69, early Alzheimer's. Wonderful woman, co-authored 8 different books. And I approached her back in the day because I had this idea for this book. I had an idea for my work, but I didn't have the knowledge to get a book done or to get an agent, to get a publisher. And Diane had done all those things. So we drew up a 1-page agreement and it was a 50-50 royalty deal for life. When you co-author a book, really the intent is you're going to be connected for life. Tom Searcy and I realized we're connected for life. Mark and I are connected for life because of these books. Now, your relationship is really what matters, but the book is something that you control together for life. So you want to have some parts of the agreement. I'm going to share some. The first is you need to decide who's going to be listed as the lead author. So this is important in the publishing world. The first name on a book, that means that person contributed the most to the intellectual property of the book. So in academic world, where I came out of, we certainly know that. It's very common to co-author books, and it goes in order of who supplies intellectual property to the book. So that's something you're telling the world. So I'm happy. I've been second and third author on books. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. I've been first author. But you just have to have a conversation and an agreement up front and a knowledge why. doing it in alphabetical order is not the right answer. It's an answer, but it's not the right answer. And do you go with first name alphabetical order or last name alphabetical order? No, it's an agreement. I mean, it's one of many agreements that you're going to have to complete a book. Let me tell you. So I covered the deciding the ownership. I don't recommend 50-50, at least 51-49. If it's a three-way book, I still have it that the lead author has 51 and the other ownership percentage is split among the other two authors. I've seen as many as 4 people authoring a book. I would still recommend that the lead author has 51% and the other 49 is split among 3 ways if you're doing it that way. I think it's just more important for moving forward and having decisions such as, let's do a revised edition of the book. Well, if it's 50-50 and one person says, no, I don't want to, then that's stopped. If it's 51-49, it can move forward. They do not lose their monetary interest in the book, but you can't force them to contribute to the revised edition of the book. So you can decide what the royalty split's going to be, even though there's like 51, 25, 24 ownership, something like that. You can decide that royalties will be split equally, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, or if it's in the case of 4 people, and that's the absolute max, and I've done it, but it's messy. Everybody can have 25% of the book. It's just a decision you have to make up front. Remember, the royalties in my world is about paying back the cost to publish the book. The real money is on what happens as a result of the book. Now, Mark and I live in a world of multiple right answers. Mark, if we can go to improv and if I can throw it back to you, maybe you should talk about growing your business in this book that you did by yourself. And you've had a different experience about making money on the book. You've actually made money on the book. Mm-hmm. Do you care to share?
Oh, for certain. And some people know the good, the bad, the ugly, and the great about that little blue book. After my disastrous experience with a co-author, my confidence was rocked. And of course, everybody, as I began to speak more, everybody began to say, you're a pretty sharp guy, do you have a book? How come you don't have a book? It's like, I should have a book. It's like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And so I began to ask questions, and there's a lot of well-intentioned advice out there. And so I began to ask questions, and people came back and said, Mark, it should be 50,000 words, and it should 10 chapters, should be hardcover. You should charge a lot of money for it. And if you don't, no one is going to take it seriously. And so I did it. I wrote a 50,000 word manuscript, and when I got done with it, I thought there's a lot of crap in here. And I cut 43,000 words and was left with a little mass market size paperback book with about 7,000 words. Today, I know that's a little bit short of my lighthouse recommendation for a $10 book that, you have about maybe 10,000 words plus or minus 1,000 words. But I wrote this, and but I had a coffee with a book distributor by the name of Donna Montgomery in Minneapolis, grandmotherly type. And she asked me questions. She was willing to have a coffee with me, and very seasoned book distributor. And she said, Mark, maybe the best piece of it sounds like a great book. I think the best piece of advice I can give you is you are the only one who has to be excited about your book. She said, not the publisher, not the distributor, not the bookstores, And then she said the words that forever changed my life. She said, if you are excited about it, it will have a long life. Your readers don't even need to be excited about it. And that's when I went back and cut 43,000 words and published a book that I was excited about. Now I broke every publishing rule in the book. I've taken a lot of bullets. You know, I've been critiqued up and down from speakers, authors, editors. I get it. But the book struck a chord. And I'm just as excited today about that book as I was 20 years ago when it first came out. But the money side of it for me, I made a couple of I guess you'd call them strategic decisions, but I think they were either accidentally brilliant or divinely guided, and I would go probably with divinely guided. I have never discounted my books in the back of the room. I never had an offer that said, if you buy one today, I'll throw in this, or now it was only $7.95, but I pre-sold 1,000 copies. I put an order form on the back of my workshop evaluation form. I wish I still had a copy of it because it was fairly crude. I mean, I didn't even have a graphic of the book. It just, book to be released, you know, give me your name and you know, check off how many you want. You don't need to pay for it now. When the book arrives, or when the book is released, I'll mail you your order with an invoice. And I pre-sold 1,000 copies. And even that was a bit of a nightmare. Believe it or not, all of a sudden it's like we were shipping books right and left. I'm not sure I collected every check, you know, for every invoice that went out. But the way that I made money on it, one, I come from the printing background. My first run on the book was 10,000 copies. My second run on the book was 15,000 copies. And so my per copy book charge was pretty low. And I used that book as a negotiating tool to get increased speaking fees right and left. But the real money came when I put together a quantity pricing program. And one day I came up with this, and it was like, if you buy 25 or more, you get 25% off. If you buy 50 or more, you get 50% off. Now, people ask me today, do you really think you had to go 50% off on an order of 50 or more? And I say, you know, my response is, you know, I'm not sure. I'll go back and ask the 800 people who ordered an order of 50 copies or more. I don't think I would have nearly moved over 40,000 copies in volume or quantity or bulk sales. But here was the fascinating thing for me. It wasn't just an add-on for speaking clients. Individuals bought 50 copies or more. I met Henry for the first time, and I handed him a copy of my book. He looks at it, you know. I don't know why he was supportive in that moment. And he was smart enough to know that I had broken a lot of publishing rules. But he looked at it and he said, if I buy a bunch of these, I mean, what's the price? I said, oh, thank you for asking. 50% off on an order of 50 or more. He said, ship me 50 copies of the book. I mean, we had only had coffee and he ordered 50 copies. Last summer, a consultant reached out to me and said, hey, I stumbled upon your little book, Growing Your Business. He goes, I really like it. I said, well, you know, you need to kind of get over the fact that my junior high photo is on the back cover. He said, that's fine. you know, what would you charge me for 100 copies? And he ordered 115 copies, I think. And then he came back to me and said, Mark, I anticipate that every other month I'm going to order another 100 or so copies. I think he's put in, he hasn't reached that level, but I think he's put in 4 orders of 100 copies or more on a book that's 20 years old. One of the people that he gave it to, an accountant in Minneapolis, reached out to me and said, hey, I got a copy of this book from Greg. I really like it. I'd like to use it with my small business clients and prospects. Can I get 120 copies of it? And it, you know, I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, 20 years after it was published. But I think that's the power of having a book that you're not only excited about, that will have a long life because you are excited about it. The strategic decision I made many years ago was that I was the growing your business guy. With the people that I serve best, there is not another business coach or consultant that can even carry my briefcase. If I don't believe it, how am I ever going to get you to believe it? People are persuaded more by the depth of your conviction than by any logic that you present or propose. That's the power, and that's how I have made money on my first book. I think we're up to a little over 80,000 copies now. And we do intend to release the 20th anniversary edition with maybe the 59-year-old photo. Henry?
First, I want to go back to that coffee and, you know, the Minnesotan and the Dutchman. So I looked at the book and skimmed it. And so I just had some really good basic tips. I mean, no offense by that. I mean, a compliment by it. So, and I thought, when I asked you how much for 50, and you said, you know, $4 a piece, I thought a $4 gift to a new client. What can I give them for $4? You know, some candy, you know, a nice pen. And I believe in something called tonnage. And I learned this in the program for authors and authors who are creating programs like we all create. And they said, a new client signs up. You know, we could take Joe. Joe's on the call. Joe signs up for me to publish his book and to edit it and do some things. And there's an agreement and a commitment to, you know, 5 figures of money. And then he's kind of sitting and waiting for something to happen. They said, don't let them wait. Send them tonnage. Send them a bunch of stuff to read and to listen. More stuff than they can read or listen to in 90 days. So it's sort of like, okay, it's all on you, Joe. How are you doing with that reading? Have you been listening? You know, I have some questions to ask you about it. Are you ready? So it's the best defense is a good offense. So when you're doing a $5,000, $10,000 program, you know, right now our book blueprint is $3,900, and I'll send these books not as a manipulative strategy, but I want you to read Judy Carter's The Message of You. Now, Judy didn't give me a $4 deal, Mark. I'm paying a lot more for those books. The tonnage got a lot more expensive. There's some of our own authors' books. Craig, yours book, if people are interested in sales, I include, and there's other ones I include. The point I'm getting to for all of us is, I hope your wheels are turning about what is a $10 book that I could co-author with somebody. It's not going to be the greatest work of literature that's ever created, but it's going to have some solid information. And I could sell for $5 a book. And because we printed a few at a time, maybe we're making a few bucks a book, but that's not the real issue. Mark, how many presentations have you given called Growing Your Business?
Over 1,000.
Yeah. Many clients come as a result of that? Sure.
For sure. Many
Yeah.
clients, some in this conversation, but it also became the anchor tool for my life's work in the form of a weekend retreat called the Achiever Circle. This weekend, I'll do number 155.
Yeah. That really was your curriculum, was that book. And then you and I played it with a notebook and giving them all, game of business worth playing and giving them stuff for the weekend. I still have, this has always been on my desk. And the best practices are in here, my notes on each practice. But Build Your Consulting Practice was just capturing your curriculum. I think now when people really learn about what you're about, and when people, through me, I said, well, there's more than just publishing this book and speaking. There's a whole philosophy of business development that's going to serve you. It's what I wish I knew 30 years ago. It's what I'm spending the rest of my life telling people about, is this system, summarized by your 9 best practices. So that's in that book. A lot of that was, I recorded Mark, I transcribed Mark, I attended the sessions, I took notes. There's still jokes today. I'll be at the Achiever Circle this weekend. Mark will say something great that I hadn't heard before. And Mark will say, Henry, are you writing that down? I said, I'm writing it down. We're getting it in. So what could that be for you? Well, let me go back to some other things Diane Gage taught me about co-authoring. You have to decide your approach to writing. How are you going to write this? Because you don't write by committee. So one way is to have one person do the first draft of the whole book, and then another person come in and provide notes and comments and additions to it. A second way is you divide and conquer. With Diane and I, that first book, Self-Marketing Secrets, 10-chapter book, I wrote 5 chapters, she wrote 5 chapters. We exchanged them and edited and rewrote the chapters and then exchanged them back. There are other ways to do it, but you need to have a plan about how the work's going to be divided up and done. Rainmaker Confidential, we're doing it where I'm doing the whole first draft. Scott and Mark are adding things, making comments, corrections, giving me things to add. That's just one way. Defining you, maybe it'd be good, Mark, tell them how we attack defining you.
Thank you. Defining you was a project that I had wanted to do for some time. And some of you are familiar with my work around, originally around a defining statement. And then I expanded it and created a template for a defining paragraph. And then I started to just sort of talk loosely about having a defining story. And Kathy McAfee had asked me for permission to share some of my work around a defining paragraph with her clients. And I gave her permission to do that. And lo and behold, the idea came that she and I should write a book on defining statement and defining paragraph. And we literally carved out a weekend in mid-April several years ago. And our goal was to write a book in a weekend. And we started at 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and we plan this out and go away and write and come back an hour later, and we were emailing back and forth. And by the end of the weekend, I thought, we're missing the module on defining story. Oh, I know a guy about story. And so I said, are you open to a try author? She said, well, sure. And so I don't remember if I called or emailed, but I just said, are you in? And within about 24 hours, he had sent us all kinds of stuff on story. And the book was literally done in a weekend. And I think it took us about 6 months from mid-April to we had it in hand by mid-November, and we distributed it at our annual Whatever It Takes conference. But that was the power of 3 people coming together with a very specific, each owning a module of the book. And I think that's a publishing success story, a co-authoring story in and of itself.
Of all the books you and I have written together, that would be the first book I would have somebody read. And if they can get what that book is about, then they're on the right path.
Yeah. I you know, as much as I like growing your business, well, I love Never Be the Same. But I think Defining You is maybe the most immediately applicable book for someone in business or sales. Immediate impact.
The 7-sentence defining paragraph is simple but not easy. The concept is simple. The decisions you need to make, the 7 decisions you need to make, you know, it could create a multitude. It's like chess. The first 7 moves of the chess game can determine a million types of games that you're going to play. So that is a success story. Thank you for that. You also now have to know how you're going to approach editing and proofing the book. I like to say any book worth writing is worth writing a first draft that sucks. The magic is in the rewrite. It's in the editing. It's coming back. It's getting past the fear. And I want to go into a dark place for a bit. A little dirty secret of our business. There's a newspaper that's considering writing a story about me as San Diego's most prolific author. And I was sort of taken aback when they said that. And they said, could you give us a list of like books you've worked on and, you know, so many years? So I gave them a list of 125 books I've either written, ghost written, co-authored, developmental, edited in the last 7 years. Pretty impressive. The dirty little secret is there's another 125 that I've worked on that did not get published. And I am not the reason they did not get published. In fact, some have been completely paid for, edited, loaded into Amazon, and they won't let us push the button to publish the book. And in conversations with Mark, I've decided it's the perfection trap, the fear that their book's not perfect. The second thing is the comparison trap. They're comparing their book to others. I remember one person who called me and said, I want your help writing the book. It's got to be as good as Eat, Pray, Love. Well, so you know, I don't like the book Eat, Pray, Love. So like, I thought that'd be easy. But seriously, another person was like, well, how does this compare to like Good to Great? We're comparing good to, you know, a million seller to your book that you want to come out with that is really a great marketing tool, a super business card, but not a great work of literary genius, and that's okay. However, many people couldn't pull the trigger. Now, every author on this call, I know you personally, I know you intimately, I know you didn't think the book was perfect when we published. There was so much more you could have done if we had more time. If we just had more time, no, we had enough time. We need to move on and give this wisdom and insight to the world and go to your next book. But your next book does not have to be as thick as, I was going to say the Manhattan phone book. Now I'd have to, for millennials, people used to have books, an amber colored book you would look through to find the phone numbers of people. So anyway, there were thick books, trust me. You don't need the big tome. Maybe the solution is this small book. Defining You is probably 20,000 words. The dental story book is in the 15 to 20 range. I get this from Ken Blanchard, who I was a big fan of Ken. I had written about him, helped produce a TV show on his work. I was a fan. And he asked me to help him with a book. So uncredited ghostwriting on a book for Ken. You know, these things go, the relationships. And then when we had the first forum, you know, we couldn't afford the $50,000 speaking fee of Ken Blanchard. So I asked, is there anyone in the organization who could come and help us? And they said, Ken has said that will be Ken, you know, and the fee is $0. Now, I learned about co-authoring too many years ago when I co-authored a book called Closing America's Job Gap. I was the number 3 author. It was by 2 professors, one at Berkeley, one at UC San Diego. And then I was the journalist that was invited to have some stories that illustrated the book, the stories of real people. So it was like section 3, stories of real people. And they went to Ken Blanchard to get the endorsement. And Ken called from Europe and said, this is an amazing book. There's only one thing wrong. He goes, those stories at the end need to be moved to the front. And that's where we met from that. And he's been a mentor. He's been a mentor to this business, given us some valuable advice on this. But through Ken, I met his agent, and his agent came as a guest to my book launch for Closing America's Job Gap. And as her +1, her date, she brought Spencer Johnson. And Spencer is the author of Who Moved My Cheese. It sold 12 million copies. And the agent said, Henry, I want you to meet Spencer Johnson. And I said, Spencer, it's such an honor to meet you. Between the 2 of us, we've sold 12 million books. And he smiled and said, actually, Henry, between the 2 of us, we've sold 25 million books. Spencer had sold 25 million books because he was the co-author with Ken Blanchard of The 1 Minute Manager. That agent put them together at a party and said, you 2 need to write a book. Ken, you've got all this academic, you know, he was a PhD professor out of Cornell. You've got that. Spencer he was an MD who wrote children's books. Some of my favorite children's books, he profiled these different people, and there was a value from each person, from Will Rogers or Nellie Bly or Cochise, you know, diverse, way ahead of his time on this. This set of books was in many schools. I bought them for my own children, just wonderful books. But all of Spencer's books, other than those 2 books, didn't total up to $1 million. Spencer was with traditional booksellers. He probably got $1 royalty per book. So he probably made $25 million in royalties, a success by anybody's estimate. But that's not what got him the mansion on the beach in Maui and his other home in Rancho Santa Fe. It was speaking and teaching. He thought that story from Who Moved My Cheese was the dumbest little story in the world. And people would pay big money to have him tell that dumb little story and get their teams working together on change. So you never know what this combination could be or who you could connect with. The next part of it is you got to decide how you're going to jointly market the book. Now, I'm going to mention Rainmaker Confidential because Mark, Scott, and I one part of the agreement is we've agreed to each buy 200 copies of the book and mail it to a targeted audience. Now, I have a different target than Scott. Scott's attorneys. Mine tend more to be people in management consulting and marketing and advertising. Mark, financial services is a big market for him. So we've agreed to do that. Well, the synergy of 600 books going out there, think of what that can produce in terms of speaking engagements, retreats. I would like to think some of those 200 people I send them to might want to have a ghost author and a publisher write and publish their book. What could it be for you? So don't leave the marketing step out of the planning here. That leads to the next thing. Decide how you're going to get paid for the speaking engagements. There are different models on this. One I advocate is sort of the buffalo hunt. You get to eat all the buffalo that you hunt. So in other words, you sell yourself, you make the engagements, you don't need to split your fees. Now, a variation, I signed a deal once where the lead author was very famous and very successful, much more than I. However, he couldn't go to every speaking engagement, and there are some that wouldn't have his budget, but would fit into my budget. I agreed that they could sell me at a certain price and keep 25%. And I was happy as a clam with that, especially if somebody just gives you a deal. It's like a speaker's bureau. I know Mark has a bureau price and a non-bureau price, and there's nuances of that, which you can learn more about. But just think, you're not all for one, one for all. We've put our fortunes in together on this. I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice, but you're not signing some joint venture deal, creating this entity, an LLC or something like that. It does not have to be that complicated. You don't have to overthink it that hard to do a book. To my knowledge, most people who do books together do not form these entities that everything comes under it, and get lots of lawyers involved. Make all the legal decisions remain yours. Please seek competent legal counsel before making any decision. God bless America. Void where prohibited by law. Okay, so there's the disclaimer. Where can you go for some advice? I suggest a free phone call to me if you need anything on this. Happy to talk it through. Mark, we can pull Mark in as chairman of Indie Books if there's special knowledge that he has. We're here to help you and to set this up. For the people listening in on the podcast, we offer something called a book chat. You can do it with Devin DeVries, and she'll help you get clear on your goals and assets and what the roadblocks are and how other people have gotten from where you are to where you want to go. If more specialized knowledge is needed, Devin can kick it up to myself or to Mark or to other people in the Indie Books family. It's a great resource. I suggest you take us up on it. Like the police, the first phone call is free. After that, there's a cost associated with our advice. So just be thinking about that. Well, Mark, I see we're about 50 minutes into the program. Was there anything you wanted to add in closing?
Thank you, Henry. Simply the fact that if all you're thinking about is your current book, I would encourage you to think about what is your book's plan. I want to release a book a year for the next 10 years, and I would expect that probably 7 of those would be co-authored. There is, and even Henry, to your point about tonnage, I recently dropped off 5 books, 5 different books that I've either authored or co-authored to a speaking prospect for a 2-island trip in Hawaii in January of 2023. Unexpected. happens to be in Minneapolis. And so I just boxed up 5 books and dropped them off at his office. In a tie with another speaker, I believe I will win.
It's a great story. Thank you for that. In the former days, Mark, when you and I used to go to events and speak and have tables, I remember when you got to the 5-book level and you had your table and people could visit with you or buy a book or do whatever. And there was just a different energy when you had the 5 books out there versus, you know, the good old days with the little blue book. And that was all. Or then the little blue book can never be the same.
The shift happened at number 4.
Yeah.
And I don't know if maybe my internal self-talk was, well, maybe the first book was a fluke. You invested quite a bit on the second book. No wonder that one worked. The third book, Defining You, I think is the real winner. But there was at that 4th book, or excuse me, we came out with Build Your Consulting Practice and then Defining You. But there was something that happened internally for me at the 4th book. It was like, no, maybe I am a player in the field. And I want each of you to think about your favorite author, even if it's not me or Henry, but think about your favorite author, whether it's Spencer Johnson or Ken Blanchard or Seth Godin or whoever you perceive to be a thought leader. Do you think Seth Godin was going to stop at Purple Cow? It's like, no, you're always working on the next book.
There's so much magic in talking about your next book. Thought leaders are always working on their next book. They're never one and done, or they did to 2 and that's all they had to say. So that's a great thought. So some of it is anything great in life wasn't accomplished alone. You had help. And we're here to help, but there's more help you can get. I'm very touched that some of our authors do get together and outside of us, put on programs together and promote together and do these things. I think the relationships are so important. And the relationships you get through these other authors are so important to advance your work. I want to thank Mark today for sharing the talking stick, and thank you all for coming out, and look forward to seeing you on the next podcast for Marketing with a Book. Thanks, everybody.